Victoria had stopped feeling things a long time ago. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet way that happens when you spend 15 years building something from nothing. She was 38 now, and the CEO of a tech company worth over $1 billion. Her face had been on magazine covers. Her name opened doors in every major city in the world. But somewhere along the way, between the board meetings and the product launches and the endless flights to places she never really saw, she'd forgotten what it felt like to be just a person. The charity gala was just another event on her calendar. Her assistant had marked it as important, which meant she had to show up, smile for photos, and write a check big enough to make the organizers happy. She'd done this 100 times before. Wear the right dress, say the right things, leave early enough to get some work done before midnight. She was running late as usual. Her driver had dropped her at the front steps of the Grand Heritage Hotel, and she was hurrying up the marble staircase in heels that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The dress was designer, deep blue and elegant, but not exactly practical for rushing. She was checking her phone, reading an email from her VP of operations about a problem in their Singapore office, when her heel caught on something. For a split second, Victoria felt herself falling forward. Her mind, always so sharp and quick, had just enough time to think about how embarrassing this would be, how the photos would end up online, how her competitors would love it. Then a hand caught her elbow. It was firm but gentle, steadying her before she could actually fall. Victoria looked up, ready to thank whoever it was and move on quickly. She expected to see one of the security guards or maybe another guest trying to score points with the CEO. Instead, she found herself looking at a man she'd never seen before. He was probably in his early 40s, dressed in a simple but clean suit that definitely wasn't designer. His face was kind, with smile lines around his eyes that suggested he laughed often. He wasn't trying to impress her. "He was just helping. You all right?" he asked, and his voice was warm and genuine. Victoria straightened up quickly, smoothing her dress. "I'm fine. Thank you." She expected him to recognize her, to make a big deal out of it, maybe try to start a conversation about her company, or ask for a business card. That's what usually happened, but he just smiled, gave a small nod, and let go of her arm. "Those steps can be tricky. Have a good evening." Then he walked past her, heading down the stairs while she was going up. Victoria stood there for a moment, confused. Did he really not know who she was? Or did he just not care? She shook her head and continued up the stairs, but something felt different. Her hand went to the spot on her arm where he'd held her. It was strange. She couldn't remember the last time someone had touched her without wanting something in return. The gala was exactly what she expected. A massive ballroom with crystal chandeliers, tables covered in white cloth, and several hundred people in expensive clothes, pretending to care about whatever cause was being celebrated tonight. Victoria checked the program. It was something about education and technology for kids who couldn't afford it. A good cause, she supposed, though she rarely thought deeply about where her charity money actually went. She made her rounds, shaking hands with board members from other companies, posing for photos with the mayor, and half listening to a tech investor drone on about cryptocurrency. Her mind kept drifting back to the man on the stairs. There was something about the way he'd helped her. No expectations, no agenda. It bothered her that she found it so unusual. Halfway through dinner, the event organizers introduced the director of the nonprofit they were supporting. Victoria was barely paying attention until she heard his voice. "Thank you all for being here tonight. I know most of you are busy people, and giving up your Friday evening means something." She looked up. It was him, the man from the stairs. His name was Daniel, and as he spoke about the work his organization did, Victoria found herself actually listening. He wasn't using the usual charity speech tricks, the emotional manipulation or the guilt tripping. He was just honest. He talked about a kid named Alex who'd never touched a computer until he was 13, who now at 17 was building apps that helped his community. He talked about how technology wasn't just about money or innovation. It was about giving people tools to change their own lives. When Daniel finished speaking, the room applauded politely. Victoria noticed that most people went right back to their conversations and their wine. But she kept watching as Daniel stepped down from the stage and was immediately surrounded by a small group of people who seemed to genuinely care about what he was saying. She told herself to forget about it, to focus on why she was there. She wrote her check, the same amount she always donated at these things, and prepared to leave. But as she was walking toward the exit, She saw Daniel again. He was talking to an older woman, listening intently to whatever she was saying. When the woman left, he stood alone for a moment, looking tired but content. Victoria didn't know what made her do it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else. She walked over to him. "Your speech was good," she said. Daniel looked up and recognized her immediately, the woman from the stairs. "How are your heels holding up?" She almost smiled. "Still dangerous, apparently. I'm Daniel, by the way. I don't think I introduced myself earlier." Victoria. If he recognized her name, he didn't show it. "Thanks for coming tonight, Victoria. Every bit helps. What made you start doing this?" she asked, and she was surprised that she actually wanted to know. Daniel thought about it for a moment. "I taught high school for a few years, right after college. Had this one student who was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but he'd never had access to a computer at home. Everything he knew he learned from 30 minutes a day in the school library. I kept thinking about how much talent we waste because some kids get every opportunity and others get nothing. So I quit teaching and started this nonprofit. That was 10 years ago. Do you regret it? Leaving teaching?" "Sometimes," he admitted. "The money was better and teachers get summers off. But no, not really." This feels right. Victoria didn't know what to say to that. She'd never done anything because it felt right. She'd built her company because she was good at it, because she wanted to prove something, because she refused to be poor like her parents had been. "I should go," she said finally. "But good luck with your work, thanks." "And Victoria?" He waited until she looked at him. "Be careful on those stairs." This time she did smile, just a little. That night, alone in her penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Victoria couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Daniel, about the way he'd helped her without needing to know who she was, about how he'd given up a stable career to help kids he'd never met, about how he'd seemed genuinely happy, despite wearing a suit that had probably been repaired a few times. She looked at her reflection in the dark windows. A successful woman, powerful, respected, wealthy beyond measure, and completely alone. For the first time in years, Victoria wondered if she'd built the wrong thing. She'd spent so long climbing that she'd never stopped to think about what was waiting at the top. The answer, it turned out, was just a better view of how far she'd climbed away from everyone else. She thought about Daniel's hand on her arm, steadying her. Such a small gesture. Why couldn't she stop thinking about it? Victoria walked to her home office and pulled up her company's charitable foundation records. She started reading about Daniel's nonprofit, about the work they did, about the kids they helped. And somewhere around 3 a.m, still reading, still thinking, she realized something had shifted in her. That moment on the stairs, that brief touch, had opened a door she didn't even know was closed. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. 3 weeks passed, and Victoria tried to forget about the gala. She threw herself back into work with the same intensity that had gotten her where she was. There were product launches to oversee, investors to reassure, and a new office opening in Austin that needed her attention. Her days started at 5 a.m. and rarely ended before midnight. This was normal. This was comfortable. This was her life. But then came the board meeting that changed everything. Her board of directors had concerns. The company's image was too cold, too corporate. Their latest consumer research showed that people respected the brand, but didn't feel connected to it. In a world where every company was trying to show its human side, Victoria's company felt like a machine. Efficient, powerful, but without a heart. "We need a major charitable initiative," said Robert, her longest-serving board member. "Something visible, something that shows we care about more than just profits." Victoria wanted to argue. They donated millions every year. Wasn't that enough? But she knew better than to fight this battle. If the board wanted a public-facing charity program, she'd give them one. She'd learned long ago that sometimes you have to lose small battles to win the war. Her team researched dozens of nonprofits and causes. They needed something that aligned with the company's tech focus, something photogenic, something that would play well in the media. After 2 weeks of analysis, they came back with a recommendation: Daniel's nonprofit. Victoria stared at the presentation on her screen. There was his photo, the same kind face she remembered from the stairs. Her team had done their homework. His organization had a great track record, impressive results with limited resources, and a mission that fit perfectly with her company's image. The numbers made sense. The optics were perfect. She told herself that's why she approved it. Just business. Just good strategy. The first official meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at Daniel's main office. Victoria almost sent her VP of Corporate Relations instead, but something made her decide to go herself. She told herself it was because this was important, that the board would expect her personal involvement. Daniel's office was in a renovated warehouse in a neighborhood Victoria never visited. The building was old but clean, with exposed brick and mismatched furniture that looked donated. A group of teenagers sat in one corner working on laptops, completely absorbed in whatever they were coding. Daniel looked surprised when Victoria walked in. "I wasn't expecting the CEO herself," he said, standing up from a desk that had definitely seen better days. "I like to oversee important initiatives personally," Victoria replied, slipping into her professional voice. "Should we get started?" If he noticed her coldness, he didn't react to it. He just smiled and gestured to a small conference room. The meeting started off normally enough. Victoria's team presented their proposal: a significant financial commitment, use of company resources, employee volunteer programs, media coverage opportunities. It was generous, maybe too generous, but the board had approved the budget. Daniel listened carefully, asking questions that showed he actually understood the details. But as the presentation went on, Victoria noticed his expression changing. "This is certainly impressive," he said when they finished. "But I have some concerns." Victoria wasn't used to people having concerns about her company's money. Such as? "This proposal is heavy on publicity and light on actual impact. You want to film the kids for promotional videos, bring in photographers, host events where your executives can take pictures with students. That's not why we do this work." Victoria felt her jaw tighten. "Mr. Rivera, we're offering your organization more money than you've seen in probably 5 years. I think you can accommodate some reasonable requests." "It's not about the money," Daniel said, and he sounded more sad than angry. "These are real kids with real lives. They're not props for your PR campaign. If we do this, we do it right, or we don't do it at all." The room went silent. Victoria's team looked uncomfortable. Nobody talked to Victoria like this. Nobody turned down her offers. "Then maybe we should find another organization to work with," Victoria said coldly. "One that's more interested in actually helping their cause than in being difficult." Daniel stood up. "I think that might be best. Thank you for your time." He left the room, and Victoria sat there feeling something she rarely felt. She'd been rejected. Not because she'd failed or made a mistake, but because someone didn't like who she was. It stung more than she wanted to admit. Her team started suggesting other nonprofits they could work with, but Victoria stopped them. "Give me a few days," she said. "I need to think about this." That night, Victoria did something she never did. She went back to Daniel's office, alone after hours. She could see lights on in the upper floor, so she knocked on the front door. Daniel answered, looking surprised again. He was in jeans and an old t-shirt now, much more comfortable than his earlier button-up shirt. "Victoria, I didn't expect to see you again. Can I come in?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. The teenagers were gone now. The space felt bigger and quieter. Daniel led her to the same conference room from earlier. "I came to apologize," Victoria said, and the words felt foreign in her mouth. "You were right. My proposal was more about my company than about your kids." "I'm sorry," Daniel studied her face. "Why are you really doing this?" "The partnership, I mean. Is it just for publicity?" Victoria wanted to lie, to give him the corporate answer about social responsibility and community investment. But something about the way he looked at her, patient and genuinely curious, made her tell the truth. "Honestly, yes, my board thinks our company needs a softer image. We're good at making money, but apparently we're not good at making people like us." "And that bothers you?" "It bothers me that my board thinks it matters." Daniel smiled a little. "But it does matter, doesn't it? Not for your stock price or your brand perception, but actually, people need to feel like the things they buy and use come from somewhere that cares. That's not weakness, that's human." "I stopped trying to be human a long time ago," Victoria said quietly. "Being human in business gets you eaten alive." "Is that really true, though? Or is that just what you tell yourself?" They sat in silence for a moment. Victoria looked around the room at the photos on the walls. Kids graduating, kids presenting projects, kids smiling at computers. Real impact, not staged photos. "What if we started over?" she asked. "What if I actually listened to what you need instead of telling you what I want?" Daniel leaned back in his chair. "I'm listening." They talked for 3 hours. Daniel explained how his programs worked, what resources they actually needed, how they measured success. Victoria asked questions, real questions, not the rehearsed ones from the morning meeting. She learned about funding gaps and volunteer needs and the constant struggle to keep programs running. "Why did you really quit teaching?" Victoria asked at one point. Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I had this student, Luis, brilliant kid, but his family situation was rough. No computer at home, parents working 3 jobs between them. He'd stay after school every day to use the computer lab. One day I found him teaching himself programming from YouTube videos. Just this 15-year-old kid, determined to learn something nobody was teaching him. What happened to him? He's at Stanford now, full scholarship, studying computer science. But I kept thinking about all the other kids like Luis who don't get lucky enough to have a teacher who stays late or a school with a computer lab. So I started this place." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. "My parents were immigrants," she heard herself saying. "They worked in a restaurant, both of them 6 days a week. My dad died when I was in college. Heart attack behind the stove. He was 49. I'm sorry, he never saw any of this. The company, the success. My mom thinks I work too much, that I should have gotten married, had kids. We barely speak anymore. Do you wish things were different?" Victoria had never let herself think about that question. "I don't know. This is all I know how to be." Daniel looked at her with something like understanding. "You know what I think? I think you're scared. You've built this perfect empire where you control everything, where you don't need anyone. But that's lonely. And you're here at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night talking to someone you barely know. That tells me something." "What does it tell you?" "That maybe you're tired of being alone at the top." Victoria felt tears prick at her eyes, which horrified her. She never cried. She stood up quickly. "I should go, but I meant what I said. I want to do this right. Can we try again?" Daniel stood too. "Yeah, we can try again." As Victoria left, Daniel called after her. "Victoria? For what it's worth, I don't think you forgot how to be human. I think you just forgot that you're allowed to be." She drove home thinking about what he'd said. When was the last time someone had really seen her? Not the CEO, not the success story, but just her. That night, Victoria drafted a new proposal. No cameras, no publicity stunts, just real support for Daniel's programs. She'd have to fight her board on it. Explain why they weren't getting the media coverage they wanted. But for the first time in years, she was doing something because it felt right, not because it was strategic. She sent the proposal to Daniel at midnight. He responded 5 minutes later with just 2 words, "Let's talk." And somehow, Victoria knew her life was about to become very different. The partnership officially launched 6 weeks later, and Victoria found herself doing something she'd never done before. She actually showed up, not just for the big announcement or the ribbon-cutting photo opportunity. She started coming to Daniel's office every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, blocking out 3 hours on her calendar that her assistant was instructed to protect like they were board meetings. At first, Victoria told herself it was due diligence, making sure her company's investment was being used properly. But that excuse wore thin after the first month. The truth was, she wanted to be there. Daniel had a way of making everyone around him feel like they mattered. He remembered names, asked about people's families, actually listened when they answered. Victoria watched him work with the kids in his programs and saw something she'd never seen in her own office. People who genuinely wanted to be there, who weren't counting down minutes until they could leave. One Thursday afternoon, Victoria was sitting in the corner of the main room, supposedly reviewing quarterly reports on her laptop, but actually watching Daniel help a teenage girl named Riley debug her code. Riley had been stuck on the same problem for 20 minutes and was clearly getting frustrated. "I'm just stupid," Riley said, pushing back from the computer. "I'll never get this." "You're not stupid," Daniel said patiently. "You're learning. There's a difference. Every programmer who's ever lived has felt exactly like you do right now. You know what separates the good ones from the ones who give up? What? The good ones keep trying. Come on, let's look at it together." They worked through the problem line by line, Daniel asking questions instead of just giving answers. When Riley finally found her mistake and her code worked, she jumped up so fast she almost knocked over her chair. "I did it. Oh my God, I actually did it." Daniel was grinning. "See, not stupid, just learning." Victoria found herself smiling too, a real smile, not the professional one she used in meetings. When was the last time she'd felt genuine joy at someone else's success? After Riley went back to her work, Daniel came over to where Victoria was sitting. "You're here again," he said. "I'm here every Thursday." "I know. I just didn't expect you to keep coming. Most corporate sponsors visit once, take their photos, and disappear. I'm not most corporate sponsors." "No," Daniel said, looking at her with that patient, seeing way of his. "You're not." Something in his tone made Victoria nervous. She closed her laptop. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" They went to his small office, which was barely more than a closet with a window. Victoria had seen janitors' closets bigger than this, but Daniel had made it comfortable somehow. There were plants on the windowsill, photos of students who'd graduated from his programs, and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Director." "I've been thinking," Victoria started, then stopped. She didn't know how to say what she wanted to say. "That's dangerous," Daniel joked. "What about?" "About what you said. That night when I came back. About being lonely." Daniel waited, giving her space to continue. "I've spent 15 years building my company. I wake up at 5 every morning. I work until midnight most nights. I've missed birthdays, holidays, funerals. I've sacrificed relationships, friendships, everything. And I told myself it was worth it because I was building something important. But lately, I don't know. Being here, watching you work with these kids, seeing how much they respect you, how much they care, I'm starting to wonder if I built the wrong thing." "You built something incredible," Daniel said. "Your company employs thousands of people. You've created technology that helps millions. That matters. But I'm 38 years old, and the only people in my life are people I pay to be there. My assistant, my driver, my housekeeper. When I go home at night, I'm alone. I have a penthouse apartment with a view of the entire city, and I'm the only person who ever sees it." "When's the last time you took a vacation?" Victoria had to think about it. 7 years ago. I went to Hawaii for a conference and stayed an extra day. That doesn't count as a vacation. I don't know how to do nothing," Victoria admitted. "I don't know how to just exist without achieving something or building something or fixing something." Daniel leaned forward. "Can I tell you something? I almost didn't start this nonprofit." "What?" "Why not?" "Because I was scared. I had a steady job teaching, a pension, health insurance. Starting this meant giving up all that security. It meant depending on donations that might not come, working twice as hard for half the money. My family thought I was crazy. My friends told me to be practical, and part of me agreed with them." "What changed your mind?" "I realized that I could either live a safe, comfortable life doing work that felt empty, or I could take a risk doing something that actually mattered. Even if I failed, at least I'd have tried. At least I'd have lived." Victoria felt something shift in her chest. "I've been so focused on not failing that I forgot to think about whether I was actually living. It's not too late to change that, isn't it? I'm the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I have responsibilities. People depend on me." "People depend on me too," Daniel said gently. "But I still take Sundays off. I still have dinner with my sister's family every month. I still go to the movies sometimes just because I want to." "You can be responsible and still be human, Victoria. They're not mutually exclusive." They sat in silence for a moment. Victoria could hear the sounds of the kids working in the main room, the click of keyboards and occasional bursts of laughter. "I don't know how," she said finally. "I don't know how to be anything other than what I am." "Then maybe start small. Have you had dinner yet?" Victoria checked her watch. It was almost 7. "No, I usually just eat at my desk. There's a pizza place 2 blocks from here. Nothing fancy, but it's good. Want to go?" It was such a simple invitation. So normal. Victoria couldn't remember the last time someone had asked her to just grab dinner. No agenda, no business to discuss. "Okay," she said. "Yes, let's go." The pizza place was exactly what Daniel had described. Small, crowded, with mismatched chairs and paper plates. They had to wait 15 minutes for a table. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd waited for anything. Over pizza and cheap wine, they talked about everything except work. Daniel told her about growing up in Arizona, about his sister who was a nurse and constantly worried about him, about the time he tried to learn guitar and was so bad his neighbors complained. Victoria found herself laughing, really laughing, telling stories about her early days trying to get her company off the ground, about the disaster of her first investor pitch, about the time she accidentally sent a very angry email to her entire company instead of just her business partner. "You did not," Daniel said, laughing. "I absolutely did. I was mortified. Had to send out an apology email and buy pizza for the entire office, and see? You know how to be human. You just forgot. As they walked back toward the office where Victoria's car was parked, she felt lighter than she had in years. The street was quiet, lit by old-fashioned lampposts. Daniel was telling her about a student who wanted to build an app to help elderly people learn to use smartphones when he suddenly stopped. "What?" Victoria asked. "You're smiling." "Like actually smiling. I don't think I've ever seen you do that before." Victoria touched her face, surprised. "I guess I am." "It looks good on you." They stood there for a moment, and Victoria became aware of how close they were standing. She could smell his cologne, something simple and clean. She could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes under the streetlight. "Daniel," she started to say, but didn't know how to finish the sentence. "I know," he said quietly. "Me too. This is complicated." "Yeah. My board would lose their minds. Your organization depends on my company's funding. There are conflicts of interest and professional boundaries and 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea." "I know all that," Daniel said, "but I can't stop thinking about you, about this, about how different I feel when I'm here." Daniel reached out and took her hand. It was the first time they'd really touched since that moment on the stairs months ago. His hand was warm and rough and real. "I can't promise you easy," he said. "I can't promise you that this won't be complicated and messy and difficult. But I can promise you real. I can promise you honest. And I can promise you that I see you, Victoria. Not the CEO, not the company, not the success story. Just you." Victoria felt tears on her face and didn't bother to wipe them away. "I'm scared." "Good. That means it matters." They stood there holding hands under the streetlight, and Victoria felt something inside her break open. All the walls she'd built, all the armor she'd worn for so many years, it was all crumbling down. And instead of feeling weak or vulnerable or exposed, she felt free. "So what do we do now?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "We figure it out, together." "Together," Victoria repeated, and the word felt like a promise. They didn't kiss that night. They just stood there holding hands, two people who'd found something unexpected in the most unlikely place. Victoria knew there would be problems ahead. Her board, his organization, the media, the complications of mixing business with personal life. But for the first time in 15 years, she wasn't thinking about problems or strategies or solutions. She was just there in the moment, holding the hand of someone who saw her for who she really was. And that was enough. For 3 months, Victoria lived in two worlds. During the day, she was still the CEO everyone knew. Sharp, focused, demanding. But evenings and weekends belonged to Daniel, and a life she was learning to build outside of conference rooms and quarterly reports. They kept their relationship quiet at first. Not because they were ashamed, but because they both knew what would happen once people found out. Victoria's board would worry about optics and conflicts of interest. Daniel's staff would question whether the company's funding would continue if things didn't work out. So they were careful. Private Victoria started doing things she'd never done before. She took Sundays off, actually off, no laptop, no emails. She and Daniel would spend the day walking around the city, trying new restaurants, visiting museums she'd driven past 1,000 times but never entered. He taught her how to just exist without always achieving something. It was harder than running a company in some ways. One Sunday morning, they were having breakfast at a tiny diner when Victoria's phone buzzed. She ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. "You should check that," Daniel said. Victoria looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. It was her head of PR calling repeatedly. Then texts started coming in. From her assistant, from her board members, from her VP of operations. She opened the first text and felt the world tilt. Someone had leaked photos. Victoria and Daniel holding hands outside his office. Victoria and Daniel at a restaurant. Victoria and Daniel at what was clearly a weekend farmer's market. Looking comfortable and happy and very much together. The headline on the business news site was already making the rounds. Tech CEO's new romance, love, or PR stunt. "What is it?" Daniel asked, seeing her face. Victoria showed him the phone. He read through the articles, his expression growing more serious with each one. The stories weren't just about their relationship. They were questioning everything. Was this entire partnership just a publicity scheme? Was Victoria using Daniel's nonprofit as a personal project? Was the company's charitable work genuine, or just a backdrop for the CEO's romance? "This is bad," Victoria said quietly. Over the next week, things got worse. The media loved the story. A powerful CEO and a nonprofit director, it was too good to ignore. Some outlets were supportive, painting it as a romance that brought two worlds together. But most were cynical, suggesting that Victoria was using the charity and Daniel for her own image. Daniel's organization started losing donors. Small donors at first, people who felt misled or manipulated, then bigger ones, corporations that didn't want to be associated with controversy. Within 10 days, they'd lost 40% of their annual funding. Victoria tried to fix it. She released statements, had her PR team reach out to donors, offered to increase her company's contribution to make up the difference, but it only made things worse. Now it looked like she was trying to buy her way out of criticism. The board called an emergency meeting. Robert, the board member who'd originally suggested the charitable initiative, opened with a question. Victoria, we need to know, is this relationship affecting your judgment? No, Victoria said firmly. The partnership with Daniel's organization is legitimate and has been successful beyond our initial projections. But you see how this looks, another board member said. Our CEO starts a relationship with the director of the organization we're funding. It raises questions about whether our charitable work is genuine. The work is genuine, Victoria insisted. We've helped over 300 kids in the last 6 months. The program outcomes are documented and verified. That's not the point, Robert said. Perception matters. And right now the perception is damaging our brand. We need you to step back from this, Victoria. From the nonprofit, from the relationship, from all of it. Let someone else manage the partnership. Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. You're asking me to end my relationship. We're asking you to choose what's more important. Your personal life or this company. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She stood in her penthouse looking out at the city, thinking about everything she'd built. Her company was her life's work, the proof that she'd made something of herself, that her father's sacrifices hadn't been for nothing. But when she thought about not seeing Daniel anymore, about going back to her life of being alone at the top, she felt something close to panic. Daniel called around midnight. Can I come over? We need to talk. When he arrived, Victoria could see he'd been thinking too, probably reaching the same conclusions she had. I'm going to step down from the partnership, Victoria said before he could speak. I'll assign someone else from my company to manage it. That way the funding continues, the kids aren't affected, and your organization can distance itself from me personally. Victoria, no. It's the only way. Your nonprofit is losing donors because of me. My board is questioning my judgment. If I step back, both problems go away. Daniel took her hands. And what about us? I don't know, Victoria said and heard her voice break. Maybe we have to go away too. You don't mean that. Look at what's happening, Daniel. Your organization is suffering because of me. Everything you've built is being questioned. How can I do that to you? How can I be the reason all those kids lose their programs? So your solution is to walk away? To go back to being alone because it's safer? It's not about safe, it's about right, Victoria said. You were doing fine before I showed up. You'll be fine after I leave. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. Do you remember what you said to me? That night after the pizza? You said you felt like you'd been building the wrong thing your whole life. Yes? Were you lying? No, but then don't do this. Don't sacrifice the first real thing you've let yourself have in 15 years just because it's hard. Don't prove your board right, that you're just a machine that only knows how to work and achieve and sacrifice. This isn't fair, Victoria said, pulling her hands away. You don't understand what you're asking me to give up. I understand perfectly. You're choosing between your company and your life, between being successful and being happy. I get that it's a hard choice. But Victoria, you're the one who doesn't understand. Understand what? That you can have both. You don't have to choose between being a CEO and being a person who loves someone. You don't have to sacrifice everything personal for professional success. That's not strength, that's fear. I'm not afraid, Victoria said, but her voice shook. Yes, you are. You're terrified. Because if you let yourself need me, if you let yourself build something that isn't about work or achievement or proving yourself, then you're vulnerable. And vulnerability is the one thing you've never allowed yourself. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to need someone. Daniel pulled her close. Then learn. Let me teach you. But don't walk away. Please don't walk away. They stood there in her empty penthouse holding each other, and Victoria realized he was right. She was afraid. She'd spent so long being invulnerable that the thought of actually needing someone, actually depending on someone, terrified her more than any business challenge ever had. "What if we fail?" she whispered. "Then we fail. But at least we tried. At least we were brave enough to try. The board won't approve. My company needs me to be focused. So make them approve. You're the CEO. You built this company from nothing. If you can do that, you can figure out how to have a life too." Victoria pulled back and looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I really believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself." Something solidified in Victoria at that moment. A decision, a choice, a line in the sand. She'd spent her entire life letting other people's expectations and opinions dictate her choices. She'd sacrificed her father's approval, her mother's love, every personal relationship she'd ever had, all for a company that would replace her the day she retired. Maybe it was time to stop sacrificing. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency board meeting. When everyone was assembled, she stood at the head of the table with more confidence than she'd felt in weeks. "I've given this company 15 years of my life," she began. "Every waking hour, every ounce of energy I had. I've made you all very wealthy. I've built something that employs thousands of people and serves millions. And I've done it by sacrificing everything personal, every relationship, every moment of happiness outside these walls." The board members shifted uncomfortably. "But I'm done sacrificing. I'm going to continue as CEO, and I'm going to continue my relationship with Daniel. The partnership with his nonprofit will continue, managed transparently with proper oversight. If any of you have a problem with that, now is the time to say so, because I will not choose between being good at my job and being happy in my life. They are not mutually exclusive, and I refuse to pretend they are anymore." Robert cleared his throat. "Victoria, we're just concerned about—" "I know what you're concerned about, optics, image, perception, and those things matter. But you know what matters more? Being the kind of company that actually means what it says. We claim to care about giving back, about social responsibility, about being human. How can we be that company if we demand that our CEO be inhuman?" The room was silent. "I'm not asking for your permission," Victoria continued. "I'm telling you how things are going to be. You can accept it or you can try to replace me. But I think we all know how that would go in the current market." It was a calculated risk, playing hardball with her own board. But Victoria knew her worth. She knew they needed her more than she needed them. Finally, Robert spoke. "You've never talked to us like this before. I've never had a reason to." He looked around the table at the other board members, then back at Victoria. "All right, we do this your way. But we need a proper PR strategy to handle the media. Done." As Victoria left the meeting, she felt something she'd never felt after a board meeting before. Not triumph or satisfaction, but relief. She'd stood up for something that mattered. Something personal, and the world hadn't ended. She called Daniel from her car. "How did it go?" he asked. "I didn't let go," Victoria said. "I'm not letting go." She could hear the smile in his voice. "Good, because I'm not either." Standing up to her board was one thing. Living with the consequences was another. The media storm didn't disappear overnight. There were still articles questioning Victoria's judgment. Still social media debates about whether CEOs should be allowed to have personal lives. Still critics who insisted the entire partnership was manufactured. But something had shifted. Victoria had stopped running from it. She and Daniel gave one carefully crafted interview to a business magazine. They were honest about their relationship, about the challenges they'd faced, about their commitment to keeping the nonprofit work separate and transparent. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that realness started to change the narrative. Slowly, Daniel's organization began rebuilding its donor base. Some of the old donors came back, reassured by the transparency. New donors appeared, people who liked the idea of a company and a CEO who were willing to be human. Within 3 months, the nonprofit was back to its previous funding level, then exceeded it. But the real changes were happening inside Victoria. She started restructuring her role at the company. Not stepping back exactly, but redistributing responsibilities. She hired a talented COO to handle day-to-day operations. She empowered her VP team to make decisions without her constant oversight. She went to therapy, something she'd always dismissed as a waste of time, and started unpacking 15 years of workaholism and avoidance. "I think I was afraid that if I stopped working, stopped achieving, stopped building, I'd disappear," she told Daniel one evening. They were cooking dinner together in his apartment, something domestic and simple that 3 months ago would have seemed impossible. Like the only thing that made me real was what I accomplished. Daniel was chopping vegetables, comfortable and unhurried. And now? Now I'm learning that I can just be, that I can exist without constantly doing. It's harder than it sounds. I know. You've been programmed for productivity your entire life. Unprogramming that takes time. Victoria watched him cook, this man who'd somehow broken through walls she didn't even know she'd built. How did you do it? How did you see through all my armor? I didn't see through it, Daniel said, looking up at her. I just saw you underneath it and decided you were worth waiting for. 6 months after the board meeting, Victoria made an announcement that shocked the business world. Her company was launching a major new initiative. They would partner with nonprofits across the country, following the model that Daniel's organization had pioneered. They'd provide technology, training, and resources to help underprivileged kids learn coding and digital skills. It was a massive commitment, tens of millions of dollars annually, and it would reshape how the company operated. But more than that, Victoria announced that she would personally oversee the initiative. Not as some ceremonial figurehead, but actually working with the programs, visiting the sites, meeting the kids. She would reduce her other responsibilities to make time for this. She would split her role, being both CEO and someone who showed up for the work. Her board was nervous, but they'd learned not to bet against Victoria. The launch event was held at Daniel's original location, the warehouse where it had all begun. Hundreds of people attended. Students, donors, educators, journalists, tech industry leaders. Victoria stood on the small stage where Daniel had given his speech at the gala so many months ago. I've spent most of my adult life believing that success and personal fulfillment were opposites, Victoria began. That I had to choose between being good at what I do and being happy with who I am. I was wrong. She looked out at the crowd and found Daniel standing off to the side, smiling at her with pride and love. The truth is, I'm a better CEO now than I was 6 months ago. Not because I work longer hours or make more money or close more deals. I'm better because I'm whole. Because I've learned that the strongest thing you can build isn't something you create alone. It's something you hold on to together. She talked about the new initiative, about the goals and the plans and the impact they hope to have. But she also talked about the kids she'd met, the stories she'd heard, the lives that could be changed with opportunity and support. A wise person once told me that I could either live a safe, comfortable life doing work that felt empty, or I could take a risk doing something that actually mattered. I spent a long time being safe, being protected, being alone. I'm done with that. When the speech ended, there was applause, but Victoria barely heard it. She walked off the stage directly to Daniel. Without hesitation, in front of everyone, she took his hand. How'd I do? She asked quietly. You were perfect. I was terrified. I know, but you did it anyway. That's what courage is. They stood there holding hands while photographers captured the moment. Victoria knew these photos would be analyzed and discussed and probably criticized by someone somewhere. But she didn't care anymore. She'd spent too long worrying about perception and not enough time living her actual life. Later that evening, after the event wound down and the crowd dispersed, Victoria and Daniel walked through the empty warehouse. Student projects lined the walls. Computers sat waiting for Monday's classes, and the whiteboard was covered in code from the afternoon's lesson. I keep thinking about that night at the gala, Victoria said. When you caught me on the stairs, I remember. You looked annoyed that you needed help. I was. I'd spent so long not needing anyone that even a moment of vulnerability felt like failure. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't helped me? If we'd never met? Sometimes. But then I remember that you came back. That night after our first meeting, you came back to my office. You could have just walked away, found another nonprofit, avoided the complication, but you didn't. I couldn't. Something about you, about this place, about the way you saw me. I couldn't walk away from it. Daniel pulled her close. You know what I love most about you? Not that you're successful or smart or accomplished. I love that you're brave enough to change, brave enough to admit you were wrong, brave enough to build something different. I'm still learning how to do this. The balance thing, the having a life thing. I still work too much. I still default to solving problems instead of feeling feelings. I know. But you're trying. That's what matters. They stood there in the quiet warehouse, and Victoria thought about how far she'd come. From the woman who climbed stairs alone to the woman who'd learned to hold someone's hand. From the CEO who measured worth in quarterly earnings, to the person who found joy in a teenager solving their first coding problem. From someone who thought vulnerability was weakness to someone who understood that letting people in was the bravest thing she'd ever done. "I love you," Victoria said, and the words came easier now. "I don't think I've ever actually loved anyone before. Not like this. I love you too, even when you work too late, even when you stress about board meetings, even when you forget that it's okay to just exist sometimes. Will you teach me how to exist every day, for as long as you want me to?" "Forever then," Victoria said. "I want forever." A year later, Victoria stood in the same warehouse for a very different event. Daniel's nonprofit was celebrating 5 years of operation and unprecedented growth. They'd expanded to 8 cities, helped over 2,000 students, and had a waiting list that stretched into the thousands. Victoria was no longer just a donor or a partner. She was part of the fabric of the place, teaching occasional coding classes, mentoring students who wanted to start their own companies, showing up for graduations and celebrations and ordinary Tuesday afternoons. Her company had thrived, too. The new charitable initiative had improved their reputation beyond anything a PR campaign could have achieved. Employee morale was higher. Recruitment was easier. Stock price was up. It turned out that being human was good for business, but more than any of that, Victoria was happy. Actually, genuinely happy. She took Sundays off. She had dinner with Daniel's sister's family every month and was slowly building a relationship with her own mother again. She went to the movies. She read books that had nothing to do with business. She learned to cook, badly at first, but better over time. She existed without always achieving. During the celebration, a teenage girl named Tasha came up to Victoria. Tasha had been in the program for 3 years and was now headed to MIT on a full scholarship. "I just wanted to thank you," Tasha said, "not just for the money or the computers, but for showing me that you can be successful and still be human. My mom works all the time, barely sees us, and I thought that's what I'd have to do to make it. But watching you, seeing how you changed, it made me realize I can have both." Victoria felt tears in her eyes. "You can have both," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And Tasha, you're going to do amazing things." After Tasha walked away, Daniel appeared at Victoria's side. "You okay?" "More than okay. I was just thinking about that first board meeting, when Robert told me I had to choose between my personal life and my company. I almost believed him." "What changed your mind?" "You did. You made me realize that choosing between success and happiness was a false choice, that the real question wasn't which one to pick, but how to build a life where I could have both." Daniel took her hand, the gesture so natural now that neither of them thought about it. "And have you built that life?" Victoria looked around the room, at the students who'd found opportunities they never thought possible, at the staff who believed in the work they were doing, at her own team members who'd shown up to volunteer because they wanted to, not because they had to, at Daniel who'd taught her that letting someone in wasn't weakness but strength. "Yeah," she said, "I really have."